Hello and welcome. As we move to the next part of Chapter 10, we'll be discussing the area of the brain that appears to be most important in memory. And then we'll explain the difference between retrograde and anterograde amnesia, because in a following video, we will use amnesiacs like Henry Molaison to understand what parts of the brain are really important for these different types of long-term memory we've been discussing. So thinking back to earlier in the semester or to an earlier video, what area of the brain did we identify as being most important in memory? So we talked about anatomy. What area did we say is, the one area you should really associate with the idea of memory when you think of anatomy? Hopefully you said the hippocampus. And so here again, this is a sagittal view, and here is that hippocampus. So we know that the hippocampus is active during memory formation and retrieval. However, is this the case for all types of long-term memory? So we're not going to discuss that in this video, but we will discuss it in the next video. And I also want to mention here that the hippocampus is in the temporal lobe, where we learned about those different lobes of the cortex, and it lies in the medial temporal lobe, or the middle part of the temporal lobe. That is an important anatomical distinction. Now, we talked about, is the hippocampus responsible for all types of long-term memory or all types of memory? So again, studying amnesia helps clarify these distinctions, not only between the brain regions, but also different types of long-term memory. So we can use amnesiacs to relate brain regions to a specific type of memory. And amnesia, just to define it, to make sure we're all on the same page, amnesia is memory loss caused by brain damage. It can also be caused by a psychological trauma too, but what we're going to be talking about really is to use amnesia to relate a brain region to a type of memory is amnesia brought on by brain damage. So the two major types of amnesia we're going to identify are anterograde versus retrograde. Now, anterograde amnesia is the loss of ability to form new memories after the brain damage. So an example from Hollywood would be 50 First Dates with Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler. Now, if you remember from the movie, which if you haven't watched it, it is hilarious, so please do. She is in a car accident. She has damage to her brain, specifically the hippocampus, and she can no longer form new memories. So every time she meets Adam Sandler, it's like meeting him over again. That's why they have 50 First Dates. Now, retrograde amnesia is the inability to remember things from the past, or the loss of memory for events before the brain damage. So older memories from the past. And a lot of times, again, this is kind of what people think of when they think of amnesia, because we see this a lot in Hollywood and on TV too. Now, if you were to go home in the middle of the day and turn on the TV and find a soap opera like Days of Our Lives, which I don't think is on anymore, but it's my example, you're going to find someone who has this amnesia, right? They can't remember anything about their past, who they are, what they did, even that they had kids, like any of that stuff. So that's an example. Some other examples might be the movie Memento. So he actually kind of had both types, and so he used notes and tattoos to remember the new things, but he also couldn't remember anything from the past. So here's a little diagram to hopefully help you remember. The trauma and the brain damage occurs at this time point X. Going forward to the present, you can't remember anything new. So that's anterograde memory loss. You're not being able to remember anything or form new memories. Retrograde is going back into the past. Think retro, right? So retrograde amnesia would be not being able to remember things from the past. Now, typically these terms are used for episodic memory, but you can also think of them in terms of semantic and procedural memories, and you'll need to for one of the assignments in the module. Now, if you can't wrap your head around retrograde or anterograde, semantic and procedural, you can just think of older memories and newer memories, and that's something that you will need to be able to identify, again, in an assignment that's in the module. So hopefully now you have an understanding of the different types of amnesia, anterograde versus retrograde, and we will again use those in a future video to talk about the different types of memory and what brain regions are really essentially important for those types of memory.